And we're live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey. This is the Sunday show. Daniela and Jackie usually do this show. Daniela is still in the hospital, but feeling better. And she just wanted me to let you guys know she appreciates everybody's well wishes and prayers and reaching out and all that. And Jackie's had something already planned. She wasn't expecting there to be a show today. So, and plus I'm doing it a little bit later than they normally do it. But you know what? We did some classic stories the last couple of shows. And I said, you know what? I've got these. I'll holler at Brent, see if he wants to come on, discuss them with me. I'm going to do two. I'm pretty sure we'll have time to do. Oh, what's your time frame here, Brent?
I got all the time you need. Nope, I'm good.
Right. No bedtime. So, all right. We've got, yeah, we're going to do the Bowman story also, which I was going to say for Wednesday, but neither one of them are terribly long, but dreadfully hard to read, man. That Bowman story is a killer, but I'm going to do the best I can. You guys know my proficiencies. Reading is one of them, but golly, this one, you'll see when we get to it. I'm sure you guys have heard it already. The way those guys talked back then was it's different. The way it's like Yoda, things are backwards.
I did the Osman story before on my shows, and I after I got done reading it, I had to go look up what this stuff was because I'd never hardtack and all this stuff. It's like, what the hell is that?
I knew what that was. I know it's like a square biscuit.
Okay.
Really, but it's flat. So it's like flat bread, but square, kind of brittle. It's like unleavened bread. Apparently that stuff lasts longer than other bread. But both of these stories, there's a very broad range of negative emotions in both of them. Fear, terror, anxiety, heartache, anguish, especially when it comes to the kids. And there are people that think these beings should just be left alone and not exposed. And if they didn't do things like this, I might agree. But they do. And who knows how much worse. So if I can get to. All right, we're going to do Ruby Creek first. And this is the Ivan T. Sanderson telling. He did, it's an article he did for True Magazine in March of 1960. This happened in September of 41. So it was, he says 18 years later that he did the interview, and then a little bit of time after before he put the article out. But it goes like this. Get my cough out there. As written by Ivan T. Sanderson. Stories about the Sasquatch have been appearing in print from time to time since the 1860s, and I have clippings in my files from almost every year since the early 1920s. But the modern history of Sasquatch really dates from September of 1941, when one of these creatures paid a visit in broad daylight to an Indian family named Chapman. While the Amerindian stories have usually been dismissed as legend or laughed off because Indians are not supposed to be reliable, you can tell this is old. This experience was accompanied by too much physical evidence to be ignored. The Chapman family consisted of George and Jenny Chapman and children numbering at my visit 4. Mr. Chapman worked on the railroad and was living at the time in a small place called Ruby Creek, 30 miles up the Fraser River from Agassiz, British Columbia, in Canada's Great Western Province. It was about 3 in the afternoon of a sunny, cloudless day when Jenny Chapman's eldest son, then age 9, came running to the house, saying that there was a cow coming down out of the woods at the foot of the nearby mountain. The other kids, a boy age 7 and a girl of 5, were still playing in a field behind the house, bordering the rail track. Sorry, got a little of a clint. Miss Chapman went out to look since the boy seemed oddly disturbed, and they saw what at first she thought was a very big bear moving about among the bushes bordering the field beyond the rail tracks. She called the 2 children, who came running immediately. Then the creature moved onto the tracks, and she saw, to her horror, that it was a gigantic man covered with hair, not fur. The hair seemed to be about 4 inches long all over and of a pale yellow-brown color. To pin down this color, Miss Chapman pointed out to me a sheet of lightly varnished plywood in the room where we were sitting. This was of a brown ochre color. I think the first one describes it better, actually. The creature advanced directly toward the house, and Miss Chapman had, as she put it, much too much time to look at it because she stood her ground outside while the eldest boy, on her instructions, got a blanket from the house and rounded up the other children. The kids were in a near panic, she told us, and it took 2 or 3 minutes to get the blanket, during which time the creature had reached the near corner of the field, only about 100 feet away from her. Miss Chapman then spread the blanket, and holding it aloft so the kids could not see the creature or it them, she backed off at the double to the old field and down to the river beach and out of sight, and then ran with the kids downstream to the village. See what I mean? She backed off at the double, which just means she quickly,
Sure.
double time.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got something in my throat.
It's all right.
All right. I asked her a leading question about the blanket. Had her purpose in using it been to prevent her kids seeing the creature in accord with an alleged Amerindian belief that doing so brings bad luck and often death? Her reply was both prompt and surprising. She said that although she had heard white men tell of that belief, she had not heard of it from her parents or any other of her people, whose advice regarding the so-called Sasquatch had been simply not to go further than certain points up certain valleys, to run if she saw one, and not to struggle if caught, or she might be squeezed to death by mistake. No, she said, I used the blanket because I thought it was after one of the kids, and so might go into the house and look for them instead of following me. This seems to have been sound logic, as the creature did go into the house and also rummaged through an old house pretty thoroughly, hauling from it a 55-gallon barrel of salt fish, breaking this open and scattering its contents about outside. The irony of it all is that all those 3 children did die within 3 years. The 2 boys by drowning and the little girl on a sickbed. And just after I interviewed the Chapmans, they also were drowned in the Fraser River when a rowboat capsized. See what I mean? I mean, horrible.
Yeah.
Wow. Miss Chapman told me that the creature was about 7.5 feet tall. She could estimate its height by the various fence and line posts standing about the field. It had a rather small head and very short, thick neck. In fact, really no neck at all. A point that was emphasized by William Rowe and by others who claimed to have seen one of these creatures. Its body was entirely human in shape, except that it was immensely thick through the chest, and its arms were exceptionally long. She did not see the feet, which were in the grass. Its shoulders were very wide, and it had no breasts, from which Miss Chapman assumed it was male, though she also did not see any male genitalia due to the long hair covering its groin. She was most definite on one point. The naked parts of its face and hands were much darker than its hair and appeared to be almost black. Swear my throat just clams up every time I try to talk. George Chapman returned home from his work on the railroad that day shortly before 6 in the evening, and by a route that bypassed the village, so that he saw no one to tell him what had happened. When he reached his house, he immediately saw the woodshed door batted in and spotted enormous humanoid footprints all over the place. Greatly alarmed, for he, like all of his people, had heard since childhood about the big wild men of the mountains. Though he did not hear the word Sasquatch till after the incident, he called for his family and then dashed through the house. Then he spotted the foot tracks of his wife and kids going off toward the river. He followed these until he picked them up on the sand beside the river and saw them going off downstream without any giant ones following. Somewhat relieved, he was retracing his steps when he stumbled across the giant's foot tracks on the riverbank farther upstream. These had come down out of the potato patch, which lay between the house and the river, had milled about by the river, and then gone back through the old field toward the foot of the mountains, where they disappeared in a heavy growth. All right, I got to give me about 10 seconds.
Sure. That's pretty amazing. I think the story, her knowledge of it was very interesting, though, in that it didn't include to run off into the, or to just to stay away from certain points, and then she using the blanket to cover up her kids because those might have been the prey. It's like, man, it's hard to imagine what a situation like that would feel like, but my heart just leaps just hearing this story.
Well, we don't have, they don't make people like this anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, set aside the likelihood of anyone being in this situation living out. I mean, there are people that do that, but there's so few that live that way now. The chances and likelihood of the same thing happening, and then someone thinking and acting and behaving in the same way. My goodness, I hate this. My throat's messed up.
Oh.
All right, here we go.
Sure.
Returning to the house, relieved to know that the tracks of all four of his family had gone off downstream to the village, George Chapman went to examine the woodshed. In our interview, after 18 years, he still expressed voluble astonishment that any living thing, even a 7'6" man with a barrel chest, could lift a 55-gallon tub of fish and break it open without using a tool. He confirmed the creature's height after finding a number of long brown hairs stuck in the slab wood lintel of the doorway above the level of his head. Aggravating. It's starting to get hot in here. That's what's wrong. George Chapman then went off to the village to look for his family and found them in a state of calm collapse. He gathered them up and invited his father-in-law and 2 others to return with him for protection of his family when he was away at work. The foot tracks returned every night for a week, and on 2 occasions, the dogs that the Chapmans had taken with them set up the most awful racket at exactly 2 o'clock in the morning. The Sasquatch did not, however, molest them or apparently touch either the house or the woodshed, but the whole business was too unnerving, and the family finally moved out and never went back. Yeah, after a long chat about this and other matters, Miss Chapman suddenly told us something very significant just as we were leaving. She said it made an awfully funny noise. I asked her if she could imitate this noise for me, but it was her husband who did so, saying that he had heard it at night twice during the week after the first incident. He then proceeded to utter exactly the same strange gurgling whistle that the men in California who said they had heard a Bigfoot call had given us. This is a sound I cannot reproduce in print, but I can assure you that it is unlike anything I have ever heard given by man or beast anywhere in the world. To me, this information is of great significance that an Amerindian couple in British Columbia could give out with exactly the same strange sound in connection with a Sasquatch that 2 highly educated men, and why that matters, over 600 miles south in Connecticut with California's Bigfoot is incredible. If this is all hoax or publicity stunt or mass hallucination, as some have claimed, how does it happen that this noise, which defies description, always sounds the same, no matter who has tried to reproduce it to me? Wow. These were probably the last words on the Sasquatch that the Chapman uttered, and I absolutely refuse to listen to anyone who might say they were lying. Admittedly, honest men are such a rarity as possibly to be non-existent, but I have met a few who could qualify, and I put the Chapmans near the head of the list. Ivan T. Sanderson, True Magazine, March 1960. Interesting. Wow. Is the correlation and the amount of evidence that there was out at that time was really scarce. I mean, this is 7 years before Patterson-Gimlin.
Right. Wow.
And it was, yeah. So this is like almost the beginning of, because, Ivan T. Sanderson and John Green and Bendernagel and Renee DeHinden, that was about all you had. A couple more that came along later in the late 60s and early 70s. But, sure. Just a handful of people that were actually out there doing it. To me, it's a lot easier to dismiss back then because we have so much now. Right. So for him to use that as a proof that the strange gurgling whistle that I've never heard from anybody, as a description, I can't remember a gurgling whistle. I mean, how does that happen, Brent? What is that?
Yeah, well, it certainly it was probably at the first part of information actually starting to travel about these things and being able to compare some kind of notes with others. I mean, there probably were just these piecemeals before that, but this person actually was able to correlate the California with the British Columbia and find that correlation, which is really cool. I don't know. It's mind-boggling in a sense because of course the First Nations everywhere have had histories of these beings, but it didn't permeate our Western culture until much later. It's like so much was ignored that could have been
Absolutely.
observed and maybe helped. And now at least the one thing I'm really glad about is that people are revisiting those First Nation stories and those First Nation legends and such to glean some kind of more information of it. And it's a good thing that they're still the First Nations people are forthcoming with. Well, many of them are. They're still very secretive, but at least there is a dialogue happening, which I think is important because I don't think anybody could know these beings better than those communities.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I kind of feel like it wasn't until it became ubiquitous. I'm not saying that these creatures weren't everywhere already,
Sure.
but there was no singular distinction for them like there is now. Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Everywhere you went, it was something different. So it wasn't like, up here we have the grass man and he's this, and they might have been describing the same thing. Well, down here we've got wood boogers. Well, over here we've got rougarou. We got skunk apes down here, and all the different names they had in the different places. I think. Plus, this was in True Magazine. Magazine. So you had to have. This is like the documentaries of the day. These articles.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask what was True Magazine because I'm not familiar with that. What did it represent?
Just an old publication. You had just like Time Life and
okay,
yeah, just a magazine. Back
sure.
when we needed stuff like that before we were able to turn pages, on our phone. Yeah, being connected and being able to singularly identify this creature, even though they may be different from one another. It's still
sure.
Everything that's underlying about it is the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the what I call the immutable characteristics. What do you hear every time? It was big and hairy and ugly and scary. Those seem, and it hides. It's hiding or it ran off or
Mm-hmm.
those were the common things. But the behaviors were different and still are different to this day. As many people as I talk to, across the country and in Canada, it's always different every time. And it's kind of disheartening a little bit because I wish they would all do the same damn thing. Would probably be a lot easier for us to get somewhere with it. But a lot of conjecture about it.
Yeah, for sure. And interestingly enough, during the narrative there, I was like, well, the incredible statement was made, like, how could a man have moved, even a man have moved that barrel? And I don't know what salted fish weighs, but it's not, what I'm envisioning is it's some kind of fish packed in a salt water or whatever. And so I did a Google search. How much does a 55-gallon drum of water weigh? And a 55-gallon drum of water would be 459 pounds.
Yeah, 456 is what I had. But I did the math, 8.3 pounds per gallon.
Oh, sure. Well, there you go. that requires math. So I just Googled.
Well, no, I have a calculator right here, so I did it right quick. See,
nice.
Still 450 pounds. That's not anything to sneeze at. But
right,
there was a man that lived down the road from me that worked on vehicles, and I saw him take a 350 Chevy small block motor out of a car by himself.
Oh my God.
No chain fall. He picked it up out of there. And that had to be 400 pounds easily, if not more. It was broken down. It was just the block. So it wasn't the heads and everything else. But the crank's still in it. And, it might have been empty oil. But this guy, Harrison Ladner is the man's name. And he's still alive today. He's in his 80s, I think. But just a hoss.
He was a big boy.
Well, relatively, he was probably 6 foot, maybe 6'1",
sure.
but just, a big old man.
Yeah. coiled steel.
Country strong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And country
My dad
boys
used
are.
to call those. My dad used to call those working muscles. Oh, you got kid muscles. You got working muscles yet?
Well, my first son is one of those. He does
Yeah.
not know his own strength. He's a big old pud now, and
Sure.
I'll put him on his behind if he messes with me. He knows it, even though he's about 3 inches taller than me and outweighs me by 40 pounds. He's a big kid, but
Sure.
that it's that kind of, you grow up like that, and it's genetic. And I don't know where my genetics came from that he would get that, but none of the rest of them are that big.
Okay. Well, now I got to ask you. So, do you think? Obviously, the narrative of the story doesn't necessarily directly suggest this, but do you think there's something to that belief that these and maybe it's by virtue of just having the belief that maybe things would happen, but isn't it odd that they had the belief that you don't look at them because if you see them, then bad things happen, and then of course people did end up passing. Is that? I know it's way out there, but you at least got to throw that out there. It's like, wow.
Yeah. Well, this is what I think.
Uh-huh.
I think we have not the ability, but I think we think and speak things into happenings.
Sure. Speaking into existence. Yeah.
Talk it up. My mother used to get upset with me. I was younger, and then I mentioned somebody having cancer, and she'd tell me, "Shut up! Don't say that." You're gonna talk it up, and we've heard that too. You talk about somebody, and they come walking up. They talk it up. So I think maybe, the universe and the way things are connected through energy, and our thoughts are part of those things.
Yeah.
There was a Buddhist philosopher, Ramadan, a genius man from India back in the day that said, if you can think it, it can happen. And that's interesting. And he used a mathematical equation to prove his theory that somewhere in the universe is creating it in your mind, and it can be created anywhere else. This was what his argument was. So do we actually, if it becomes a concern or a fear, are you lending it some kind of power where these things actually do happen, where we just happen to put ourselves in circumstances? Because the girl got sick, there's not a lot you can do about that, but she had to come into contact with something that got her sick, but everything else was an accident. So was it, I don't know. I don't know. To me, that's not fair to the kids, but
Very true.
They did get to move on to the next place, and we all have that to do.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But it is interesting. And also the fact that this Sasquatch kept coming back. And I don't think it was ever probably intending to hurt the people, because it sounds like it kept coming back and never did aggressively go after anybody, not even the dogs, which I was surprised at, because you hear about dogs being like on the hit list all the time.
Yeah. And I kind of make the point, if it's a point, it does happen, that we do tend to anthropomorphize these creatures. But are they human enough and have enough of things that happen to us when we get older? We get dementia. People become ill. It's been happening for thousands of years. This is not a recent thing.
Sure.
That Alzheimer's, is that a thing with them? Even though we kind of know underlying causes for those things, does this happen to them? Do they become demented and lose their mind a little bit? And to me, if we're going to do that, then you'd have to put that on them too. So maybe that's the case, because it is out of the ordinary. It's out of character for what we recognize as the norm for these creatures when it comes to behavior and hiding and staying away from people and seemingly not trusting us. I mean, who can blame them, really?
Right. Yeah.
They obviously know something that we don't, which I'm sure is quite a bit.
Yeah.
I also think when guns came along, it kind of changed things a little bit.
Sure.
And there are 70 million snipers in the United States, deer hunters with deer rifles out there now.
Wow. Yeah.
So you'd have to think that any Sasquatch group, family. And maybe there are some that live off in the heart of darkness that have never come in contact with people. And maybe that's true. But we know there are some on the fringes that watch us and that watch us closely enough to know us well enough to know how to stay away from us and make it a mountainous task just to get them a glimpse of, the side of a face on a picture peeking out. So
that's fascinating. Fascinating story. But it's also interesting that I wonder how far away this was from the Toba Inlet area where Albert Ostman had his experience, because
I don't know.
It was up in BC, so I was kind of curious about that. Like, wow,
I have to look into that. It's all the west coast of British Columbia there. I mean, that can't be more than 500 or 600 miles,
right?
If that, of coastline there. So I mean, back then, 4, 5, 6 miles, 20, 30 miles was nothing. People walk that far every day. Right. And someone was saying 3 miles isn't far. I was talking about this the other night. You're right. Whoever said that, 3 miles walking down the road is not really that far. But you're going to feel it when you get back. But 3 miles through the thick woods over rough terrain, that's tough, man. That's not a short distance. So I saw this from Dick Tracy. Please interview your neighbor Harrison. I don't think he would come on here. I haven't talked to him, and he's not my neighbor anymore. He was my neighbor when I was a kid. I know where he lives, and I'm actually friends with his son, but I don't think he would. I'll get a picture of him to show you guys. Just big old huge, country guy, 4 arms, pot belly, but a massive guy. Shade tree mechanic, what we call him. Well, I don't think much has changed really when it comes. I think we're the ones that have changed. I think, awareness is becoming more. We're becoming more aware, and through the efforts of many people, just like you, people that do that get a lot more views than we get here, and we don't rely on this so much to push our awareness. We rely on our produced stuff, which I'm working on, letting y'all know. Starting back to work on the Odyssey tomorrow, maybe a couple more days, I don't know, but you can see I got my camera set up back here so I can film myself doing the breakdowns.
Nice.
Yeah, this one's going to be cool. It's going to be a lot different than the others, and I think y'all really going to like it. It's very, very dynamic. A ton of stuff in it, so y'all going to enjoy it. It should be out in a couple days. But the investigation that me and Mark did, you guys can go check that out on the website. It's a link right in the description. It's right on top. Impossible. It's $3.29. And we just said if people want to help us and support us, we'll give them something for it. They can go here and do it. And we appreciate all that have done that. The banner clip is in there, not just the picture of the face, but the whole clip. And you see the wind blowing everything except him with his green face. And I showed you that picture.
Yeah. The
green face guy.
Oh, yeah.
I'll send it to you when I got it. When I couldn't believe it that I'd actually got that.
It was like, wow, that's pretty intense.
Yeah. But to see the video clip of it's over 1,000 frames. It's about 10 seconds.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. But he doesn't move. You can see his brow move just a little bit. But you see everything, all the wind blowing everything around it and what should be leaves. Since it's green, people say, oh, that's just leaves. Well, why aren't they blowing around?
Sure.
There's actually a couple like that you guys are going to get to see. But anyway, I'll quit talking about that. We've got this other story that we're going to get to. And it's just as gruesome to me. I mean, it's just the way it is written. And I'm going to read this one a little bit slower because people don't talk like this anymore. And it's the Bowman. And I was going to do it, and someone had asked for it. And I can't remember who that was, but this is it. And so here we go. Presidential frontiersman Rough Rider Teddy Roosevelt began writing his soon-to-be published book in 1890, titled The Wilderness Hunter. The author writes of a grizzled, weather-beaten trapper by the name of Bowman, whose figure of a man reminded me of actor Robert Redford's portrayal of the legendary woodsman tracker Jeremiah Johnson. Bowman, however, was German born and lived all his life out on the early frontier. Roosevelt must have had some degree of belief in Bowman's tale to include his thoughts in his book. Before his legendary encounter, Roger Patterson wrote in his 1966 book, Do Abominable Snowmen of America Really Exist, that he, Roosevelt, was a hard man to fool with a wild tale. Bowman must have held to the story, for it was said that he could hardly repress a shudder at certain points in the yarn, a yarn that was to become a legend at Roosevelt's unwitting recounting, weathering the retelling for more than 100 years and will go on infinitum. I think that's Latin for indefinitely. All right, I'm going to skip this little part right here. It's just a description. All right. The Bowman account is that as it was written in a book by Teddy Roosevelt titled The Wilderness Hunter. Frontiersmen are not, as a rule, apt to be very superstitious. No, it's bad luck. They lead lives too hard and practical and have too little imagination in things spiritual and supernatural. I have heard but few ghost stories while living on the frontier, and those few were a perfectly commonplace and conventional type. But I once listened to a goblin story, which rather impressed me. A grizzled, weather-beaten old mountain hunter named Bowman, who was born and passed all of his life on the frontier, told the story to me. He must have believed what he said, for he could hardly repress a shudder at certain points of the tale. But he was of a German ancestry, and in childhood had doubtless been saturated with all kinds of ghost and goblin lore. So that many fearsome superstitions were latent in his mind. Besides, he knew well the story told by the Indian medicine men in their winter camps of the snow walkers and the specters, spirits, ghosts, and apparitions, the formless evil beings that haunt the forest depths, and dog and waylay the lonely wanderer who after nightfall passes through the regions where they lurk. It may be that when overcome by the horror of the fate that befell his friend, and when oppressed by the awful dread of the unknown, he grew to attribute, both at the time and still more in remembrance, weird and elfin traits to what was merely some abnormally wicked and cunning wild beast. But whether this was so or not, no man can say. When the event occurred, Bowman was still a young man, and was trapping with a partner among the mountains dividing the forks of the Salmon from the head of Wisdom River. So you guys can let us know where that is too. Not having had much luck, he and his partner determined to go up into a particularly wild and lonely pass through which ran a small stream said to contain many beavers. This pass had an evil reputation because the year before, a solitary hunter who had wandered into it was slain, seemingly by a wild beast. The half-eaten remains being afterwards found by mining prospectors who had passed his camp only the night before. You see what I mean? The pass had an evil reputation because the year before, a solitary hunter who had wandered into it was slain, seemingly by a wild beast. The half-eaten remains being afterwards found. It's that kind of stuff. The Yoda stuff. Not being found afterwards, but being afterwards found. That's what I'm saying with this thing. And I'm not even all close to being through this thing, just starting. The memory of this event, however, weighed very lightly with the two trappers, who were as adventurous and hardy as others of their kind. They took their two lean mountain ponies to the foot of the pass, where they left them in an open beaver meadow, the rocky timber-clad ground being from there onward impracticable for horses. They then struck out on foot through the vast, gloomy forest, and in about 4 hours reached a little open glade where they concluded to camp, as signs of game were plenty. A lot of adjectives. There's a lot of adjectives in here.
It's like a tongue twister with different phrases and stuff. It's just neat.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, it is a story, and someone dies, so I'm not trying to be disrespectful here. It's just the way it's written, man. It's rough. There was still an hour or two of daylight left, and after building a brush lean-to and throwing down and opening their packs, they started upstream. The country was very dense and hard to travel through, as there were much down timber. Although here and there the somber woodland was broken by small glades of mountain grass. At dusk they again reached camp. The glade in which it was pitched was not many yards wide, the tall, close-set pines and firs rising around it like a wall. On one side was a little stream, beyond which rose the steep mountain slope, covered with the unbroken growth of evergreen forests. They were surprised to find that during their absence, something, apparently a bear, had visited camp and had rummaged about among their things, scattering the contents of their packs, and in sheer wantonness destroyed their lean-to. The footprints of the beast were quite plain, but at first they paid no particular heed to them, busying themselves with rebuilding the lean-to, laying out their beds and stores, and lighting the fire.
Can't hear you. Are you still muted?
Yeah, I was muted. Sorry. See, if I didn't have you here, I went on and read the whole thing.
I'm glad I'm here to help.
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, this is what I'm talking about right here. While Bowman was making ready supper, comma, not making supper ready, he was making ready supper. It's weird.
It's really poetic, though, isn't it? I mean,
it is. It is kind of poetic.
Yeah.
While Bowman was making ready supper, it being already dark, his companion began to examine the tracks more closely, and soon took a brand from the fire to follow them up, where the intruder had walked along a game trail after leaving the camp. When the brand flickered out, he returned and took another, repeating his inspection of the footprints very closely. Coming back to the fire, he stood by it a minute or two, peering out into the darkness, and suddenly remarked, "Bowman, that bear has been walking on 2 legs." Bowman laughed at this, but his partner insisted that he was right, and upon again examining the tracks with a torch, they certainly did seem to be made by 2 paws or feet. However, it was too dark to make sure. After discussing whether the footprints could possibly be those of a human being and coming to the conclusion that they could not be, the 2 men rolled up their blankets and went to sleep under the lean-to. Wow. Yeah, man. There was this big bear came and destroyed our camp, but yeah, let's go sleep. We'll be all right.
These men are cut from a different metal, aren't they?
Wow. Yeah, not cloth. Definitely tin snips.
Wow.
At midnight, Bowman was awakened by some noise and sat up in his blankets. As he did so, his nostrils were struck by a strong wild beast odor, and he caught the loom of a great body in the darkness at the mouth of the lean-to. Grasping his rifle, he fired at the vague, threatening shadow, but must have missed, for immediately after he heard the smashing of the underwood as the thing, whatever it was, rushed off into the impenetrable blackness of the forest and the night. Could you look? Rifles are very loud, even a muzzleloader, extremely loud. Could you imagine his partner laying there and all of a sudden, boom?
I think I'd stroke out and be like,
what is going on?
No doubt. Wow.
Yeah, definitely. These are men. These are definitely men right here.
Yeah.
After this, the 2 men slept but little, sitting up by the rekindled fire, but they heard nothing more. In the morning, they started out to look at the few traps they had set the previous evening and put out new ones. By an unspoken agreement, they kept together all day and returned to camp toward evening. On nearing it, they saw, hardly to their astonishment, that the lean-to had again been torn down. The visitor the preceding day had returned, and in wanton malice had tossed about their camp kit and bedding and destroyed the shanty. The ground was marked up by its tracks, and on leaving the camp, it had gone along the soft earth by the brook. The footprints were as plain as if in snow, and after careful scrutiny of the trail, it certainly did seem as if, whatever the thing was, it had walked off but on 2 legs. The men, thoroughly uneasy, gathered a great heap of dead logs and kept up a roaring fire throughout the night. One or the other sitting on guard most of the time. Now they're on guard. And it sounds like me, at Donnie Miller's, just got a bonfire going. We couldn't build a fire at Pam Paul's. There was a burn ban on. Oh, no. But yeah, Donnie Miller's, when we went out there, yeah, I had a bonfire going. So nice. I get it.
You definitely want to see it coming.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, man.
Okay, on guard most of the time. About midnight, the team came down through the forest opposite across the brook and stayed there on the hillside for nearly an hour. They could hear the branches crackle as it moved about, and several times it uttered a harsh, grating, long-drawn moan, a particularly sinister sound, yet it did not venture near the fire. In the morning, the 2 trappers, after discussing the strange events of the last 36 hours, decided they would shoulder their packs and leave the valley that afternoon. They were the more ready to do this because, in spite of seeing a good deal of game sign, they had caught very little fur. However, it was necessary first to go along the line of their traps and gather them, and they started out to do. And this they started out to do. Weird. All the morning they kept together, picking up trap after trap, each one empty. On first leaving camp, they had the disagreeable sensation of being followed. In the dense spruce thicket, they occasionally heard a branch snap after they had passed, and now and then there was a slight rustling noise among the small pines to the side of them. At noon, they were back within a couple of miles of camp. In the high, bright sunlight, their fears seemed absurd to the 2 armed men, accustomed as they were, through long years of lonely wandering in the wilderness, to face every kind of danger from man, brute, or element. There were still 3 beaver traps to collect from a little pond in a wide ravine nearby. Bowman volunteered to gather these and bring them in, while his companion went ahead to camp and made ready the packs. On reaching the pond, Bowman found 3 beavers in the traps, one of which had been pulled loose and carried into a beaver house. Beaver dam, beaver lodge. He took several hours in securing and preparing the beaver, and when he started homeward, he marked, with some uneasiness, how low the sun was getting. As he hurried toward camp under the tall trees, the silence and desolation of the forest weighed on him. His feet made no sound on the pine needles, and the slanting sun rays striking through among the straight trunks made a gray twilight in which objects at a distance glimmered indistinctly. That's poetic. Now that right there is poetic. On reaching the pond, Bowman found 3 beavers in his trap, one of which had been pulled loose and carried into the beaver house. He took several hours in securing and preparing the beaver, and when he started homeward, he marked, with some uneasiness, how low the sun was getting, this part. As he hurried toward camp, under the tall trees, the silence and desolation of the forest weighed on him. His feet made no sound on the pine needles, and the slanting sun rays striking through among the straight trunks made a gray twilight in which objects in the distance glimmered indistinctly. Wow, that's awesome.
That is very nice.
There was nothing to break the gloomy stillness which, when there is no breeze, always broods over these somber primeval forests. At last he came to the edge of the little glade where the camp lay, and shouted as he approached it, but got no answer. The campfire had gone out, though the thin blue smoke was still curling upwards. Near it lay the packs, wrapped and arranged. At first, Bowman could see nobody, nor did he receive an answer to his call. Stepping forward, he again shouted, and as he did, his eyes fell on the body of his friend, stretched beside the trunk of a great fallen spruce. Rushing toward it, The horrified trapper found the body was still warm, but that the neck was broken, while there were 4 great fang marks in the throat.
Oof.
The footprints of the unknown beast creature, printed deep in the soft soil, told the whole story. The unfortunate man, having finished his packing, had sat down on the spruce log with his face to the fire and his back to the dense woods to wait for his companion. While thus waiting, his monstrous assailant, which must have been lurking in the woods, waiting for a chance to catch one of the adventurers unprepared, came silently up from behind, walking with long, noiseless steps and seemingly still on 2 legs. Evidently unheard, it reached the man and broke his neck by wrenching his head back with his forepaws while it buried its teeth in his throat. It had not eaten the body, but apparently had romped and gamboled around in uncouth, ferocious glee, occasionally rolling over and over it, and had then fled back into the soundless depths of the woods. Bowman, utterly unnerved and believing that the creature with which he had to deal was something either half human or half devil, some great goblin beast, abandoned everything but his rifle and struck off at speed down the pass, not halting until he reached the beaver meadows where the hobbled ponies were still grazing. Mounting, he rode onward through the night until beyond reach of pursuit. This was Bobby Short wrote this in 1995. It was a reprinting from the article. So I'm sure there were mild edits, but I mean, you can tell there weren't many because this is some 50s, I guess, if you can find some stuff like that, the way this is written. And look, that's like the 3rd time I read it today. And I still had trouble getting through it just because of the way it flows and the way I'm used to reading. Normally I'll rewrite stuff, but I couldn't rewrite this.
Yeah.
There was no way to rewrite it and make it sound as good just because of that. Right. But it's a story.
It is a story. Do you think it's real? Because I tend to believe there might be
any of it.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to believe that it is. And the interesting part that occurred to me in this story was that initially it's doing what Sasquatch do to everybody. I guess they're curious. They come in, and maybe this one had never seen people before or whatever, and so it was curious. And things changed as soon as they shot it or shot at it. Now, here's the thing. They couldn't have known if they hit it, but I just think they must have hit it. And so it scared it. It probably got a wound from it. And it was like, oh, no, this is my area, and it became a fight for life or pushed this thing to that point. Maybe. And I'm not saying that they'd never do things unprovoked, but that does seem to be the point at which it got scary, like really scary, and where it was acting really aggressively and such. But yeah, what a horrible experience or story. Man,
this is the only thing about it that gets me, and it is a story. Stories change, things get written and rewritten, and I find it very hard to believe that these 2 wilderness men had no idea there was anything like that out there.
Oh, okay.
For their whole lives. I just find that hard to grasp. Not hearing any story, not having any kind of sighting or experience before this. Mm-hmm. And maybe that is the case, but it just seems very, very hard for me to grasp that they didn't know. So I think maybe those things might have gotten changed within the story, that they didn't know what this was. And Roosevelt wrote this for his book. So he's trying to sensationalize his book and make it, a good story, obviously. So those are the things that you kind of have to look at and take into consideration, because this thing started it. All these guys did was come pitch camp. This thing came in and tore it all up, and they come back and they find these footprints. And so I if we could hear it from them, I think they would tell us, yeah, we knew what it was right away. you know, and we hadn't had trouble with them before, but this was something different. And maybe that's not the case. It's just what I like to think.
Sure.
Because we know these things are out there, and they didn't just show up. They've been around for a very long time. You know, they're in print since the 1860s, been put in newspapers. Sure. And then before that, it's all over Native American, you know, oral history. And even over in Europe, and from the 1400s to 1600s, all the way to King James, it was written about wild men and them having them, you know, ordering them killed or run out. I think that's why they're not as prevalent there. I think they're still there. I think they're still over there. I just don't think there's as many. And because of what happened to them back in the day, you know, long memories, we got to stay away from these people.
Yeah.
So I think that's what happens. And that even happens here today. So
I would have to say, though, that I don't think literacy was really common in those days, though, in that most people that had spent their lives, you know, and this isn't a put down. It's just that a lot of people didn't go to school past maybe 3rd or 4th grade because they had to go to work or start hunting or whatever. And correct me if I'm wrong. I know you just read it on your other show, but the Ostman story I thought he learned about these weird ape men on his ferry ride as he was going up the Toba Inlet. But he was a woodsman, a logger and such, right?
Yeah, that's another thing. But I hunted for almost 30 years. I knew what Sasquatch was.
Sure.
You know, I'd watched In Search Of growing up, and I'd heard of Bigfoot 100%. Absolutely. Might even thought it was real. I don't remember how I felt about it.
Yeah.
But none I was going to have to worry about. You know, that's a problem if it's a problem, it's for the Pacific Northwest and the mountains. And, you know, I could see how it could be possible that something like that could survive just because of the vastness of the United States as it is even now. You know, so much of the United States, over 40% of it by this time now is never been foot surveyed.
Sure.
And it was like in around year 2000, it was about 45%. And I did hear someone say, we were talking about logging, that there are more trees now than there were 100 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Which makes sense. We use a lot less. You know, we pretty much only use timber for building houses and stuff.
Sure.
It's not, you know, used the way it used to be.
Sure. No, that's a good point. Now, I was going to ask you something and it's just gone from my head. It'll come back again.
It's on the tip of your brain.
it's just a lot going on in here, let me tell you. But
my wife, you say it's on the tip of my tongue. Can you see it?
So I guess what I was going to say, it just came to me again. What I found also very unique in this story, and maybe another embellishment, was the fact that the head was broken, but there was a bite mark in the neck, which I don't think I've ever heard that. I mean, obviously we don't hear of many aggressive reports like that, but the bite mark I thought was really unusual. I've heard back from the wild men attacks and stuff from the old 1800 days or whatever, twisting off the heads, popping off the heads of people that were in pursuit of these wild men. It seemed like that was the attack of choice, is just to grab people's heads and yank them off. But I never heard about the biting thing before, so that was unique to this story for me.
Yeah, again, it kind of sensationalizes it a little bit more.
Sure.
So I think there might have been a little bit of that going on here. You know, it's definitely written in an almost poetic way. I mean, I've read a lot in my life. My mother made me read. I've read Chaucer, Faulkner, Virginia Woolf, Hemingway. They don't talk that way.
Oh, okay.
No, the way I speak is kind of the way Hemingway speaks. You know, that's where I because I only made it. I never got past the 9th grade. I never finished the 9th grade.
Oh, okay.
But my mother made me read a lot, so that's where my vocabulary came from. And so that's who I was taught by, was those people, and life obviously teaches you quite a bit.
Yeah. The hell of a university.
yeah. So the whole thing about school and finishing school and going to college and getting a degree, Anyway, to get off that, but the way these things are written, it's almost, it's entertainment. It was the entertainment of the day.
Sure. Now, do you know that from his wilderness, what was it, the Wilderness Companion, or what was the name of his book? But what was the rest of, was there any other fantastical stories like this in there? Or was this the one odd report and everything else was more biographical as he went through?
Yeah. Well, it was, the title of the book is The Wilderness Hunter. And I've never read it, but I'm going to. Yeah. I mean, it's from 1890. It was written by Teddy Roosevelt. I think everyone should probably check it out and read it. So I don't know what else is in it. You would think, us being in the subject, at least in the little corner pocket that we're in, we would have heard something else, right? More stories from there. So I think this is probably the only one.
Which really leads me to believe that if that is the case, and that's, I've heard reference to that before, and as the material in the book seems to be really, from what I've heard, again, I haven't read it, so I don't have it on first person account, but it's more of an accounting of things that he experienced as he went through this different regions of the country. But it does really lend credibility to the fact that he must have believed this story. Now, I think he heard it from Bowman.
Bowman told it to Roosevelt.
Yeah. So
he was an old grizzled man by then. But yeah, he told it to him, and you get enough backstory on Bowman to make it really believable that Bowman was an actual guy. This and this is the story he told, and then Roosevelt describing how it upset him while he was telling it. That he has this. What did he say? Let me find it. He could hardly repress a shudder at certain points in the yarn. Which means, the way I would have written that is, he was visibly shaken at telling the story.
Yeah. Just like this was a very real thing.
Yeah. And that's what kind of gets me about the whole thing. But to me, there are some things in there that were probably changed, probably added, to make it. I mean, not that you'd have to add anything to make it an interesting story, but it's not like he got a good look at it. He's not describing, anything but a silhouette that he saw, and then, some sounds, some, long groan type of sound from it, and then footprints. And then obviously he comes back and he finds the Scott dead. So who knows, man? We know Sasquatch exists. So why the hell not?
Right.
The only thing like I said, the only real thing that bothered me was that these men were out there and had no clue there was anything like that around, which I guess is possible because it happened to me, but not that I didn't live out there. I was out there a lot, almost every day for 7 years, but I had one thing on my mind.
Right.
And it was, self-pity and what are the deer doing? That was about it. But let's hear from everybody else. Let's get some questions from chat. You got some questions for Brent and myself? Put them in caps. If you've put questions up there, I have not looked at a single word of the chat. So please forgive me. I'm gonna scroll back up and see if I can find if someone did ask a question. Here's one. Jack Melton. How long did you deny things until faced with facts? For me, I don't know that I ever denied anything. It was not like I sat around listening to Sasquatch stories. Like I said, I watched Patterson Gilman on Discovery or whatever, or In Search of, Leonard Nimoy back in the day, which was like a Thursday, I think. And
that's a good memory for you, man. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks.
That's awesome.
It was partly cloudy. It was about 75 degrees.
Sure.
But I wasn't completely ignorant to their possibility of their existence, but it wasn't like I just nosed up at it. It wasn't even a consideration, right? Not a thought, not even remotely a thought. That is why we do this. That's why we do this, because I want it to be a thought in someone's mind anyone that just happens to catch. And that's why I say the same things over and over and over and over again to the same people. If someone new does happen to come in, it'll be the first time they hear it. So let's see. Do I see a question? Oh, John with his $10. Thank you, sir. John Schleifer. Seems like encounters are on the increase. If true, why? Brent, I'll let you go first on that one. Why do you think encounters are increasing?
So I think it's probably two-pronged or several-pronged, actually. I mean, I don't think it's probably not an easy question to just address with a single answer, because I think there's a lot of things going on. First and foremost, I think people are more comfortable coming forward with these stories than any other time in the history. Like, there's now an ongoing dialogue through shows like Bigfoot Odyssey and through other shows where people can talk
that's
about
this show.
That's why I put it first. But I think people feel like they have an avenue for this discussion, which in the past never happened. I mean, people would have been ostracized in many cases by coming out saying, I just saw a big hairy man in the woods. It's like, yeah, it's time for your meds. I mean, that would have been the reaction. But now people are like, oh, really? Well, check out this show or this site and go talk to them about it. There's the BFRO, other reporting sites. So there's more avenues to have the discussion. So I think, and if you look at the BFR, you find reports from, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So people are finally utilizing that to share what they've experienced. Now, I think that there is possibly more experiences just in volume, but I think it could be as a result of us displacing them, like we're pushing them out of areas that maybe they'd been in their whole lives and are pushing them towards other areas, which makes them more vulnerable to being seen. And who knows, maybe there are more of them out there. It's anybody's guess, but I think primarily there's always been experiences, but there hasn't always been the ability to share those experiences. So that's my answer.
Well, I think you're right. I think the happenings were there. We just weren't privy to them.
Mm-hmm.
And once Sasquatch Chronicles came along, I mean, I'll say it a million times. Thank God for Wes Germer and Woody. Oh, yeah. I mean, it sucks what they went through, but it's pushed this subject. Finding Bigfoot did too, but finding Bigfoot did as much on the back end to hurt the subject as it did to help it, because they never found a damn thing. And it was always down the middle. It's the protagonist, antagonist. This is, real, and they got to find somebody to refute it. Obviously, they got to please everybody. So it's understandable the way they do those things. But yeah, I think you're right. A lot of these stories, once they were told back in 1980, 1975, 1981, back in the early 90s, when so there were happenings, they just weren't coming out. And when it comes to places like where I'm from, it's just a thing. There's nothing to report. You might tell the neighbor, hey, there's woodbookers around here. I heard some knocking, there's some screaming, watch your chickens, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's not like, got call the sheriff. I saw a big hairy white. No, it was just a thing. A woodbooger. Oh, there's a woodbooger around here. Okay. Kids, don't go near the woods. There's a woodbooger out there. And of course, when you heard that, you were just, okay, mom and dad, our grandpa, whatever, trying to scare you is what you thought. But no, obviously not. But I think now that this is the information age, man. It's the age of enlightenment. And it just seems to be coming to pass that this is the case. These stories are coming out. It's all we have, aside from, the occasional blurry picture that I have. I've got plenty of blurry pictures. But anyway, there's a few more questions here.
Cool.
Phil C. Good to see you, Phil. You look just like Johnny Cash, Phil. Carrie, do you believe there are different species of Sasquatch? I don't know. Maybe, Phil. I think maybe there's species and a subspecies of that, and then maybe a mix with humans in there. Maybe there's pure bloods, and who knows? What we see, there appears to be different looks, but who knows if different, through genes and attributes, that different things are expressed, even in the same family. You have two that look different from one another. This happens with human beings. You get brothers and sisters that don't look anything alike, same parents. So maybe that is the case. We've caught them that look very human. I mean, I know y'all are tired of seeing all this, but I'm gonna show it anyway. When you look at this is the banner shot. Man, you can't see his lower jaw that well, but that's awfully human. I mean, that's a very human looking face. It's just big. And like I said, when you watch this, you see all the wind blowing everything around except him. He's perfectly still. Oh, and if you haven't seen this, diffusion with green faces is a natural occurrence. It does happen. I just wonder if Sasquatch doesn't have just oily layer of skin, so it happens more. But you got that. This is pretty close to what I saw. Very human looking. But his face is dark. It's black.
Mm-hmm.
This guy right here, he's looking to the right. I showed before, got a long upper lip. Can you see that, Brent?
Oh yeah, for sure.
You see his eyeball a little bit. It's just zoomed in too far. This is only 40 feet away, but it's across a canal, and he's just poking his face through the bush. And right there to the left of his eye, you see that blur there, and that's actually a tree. And I saw a comment from someone that mentioned vibrating, and no, that's not what that is. That's digital interlace.
Yep.
From a moving camera. The clearest frame we could get was this. And that's what happens when you zoom into digital, because this is him with his mouth closed. And I showed this the other night. Mouth closed. And right here, I've got it with his mouth open. It's a lot darker. Where in the heck is it? I just, this thing is so small that I can't see what's what. Okay, wait, here it is down here. Mouth closed. Mouth open. See it now with his mouth open?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
See the tree?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mouth closed. Mouth open.
Wow.
So, but what is he doing? Is that how they do the infrasound?
Right. That's interesting.
They're on a levee, and this is straight out across from where Melanie is. Is he looking down to where Mark was and giving him some awe, some infrasound? But if you look at it not so zoomed in, it's a lot more impressive than that. And this, you can't tell what's what. That's too zoomed in. I'll have to come back and make those smaller. See if I can't get Jesus to sharpen some of these up for us, because I've tried to do that, and I don't know how in the world he does it. But I got a question right here from Nick. Hello. Have you ever tried to get David Politis on the show? His Bigfoot books are excellent. We have. We actually had our people reach out to his people. Actually, I reached out to his people, because you can't talk directly to him. He has a publicist and all that good stuff. And you're gonna have to pay him to come on. I don't want to say probably. I know that's the case. I'd love to get David on here to talk about some stuff, but from what I hear, he gives you a list of questions that you can ask him. So I guess he doesn't want anyone to ask him, do you think it's Sasquatch taking people? Because he don't want to. And everybody knows this. I'm not telling anything.
Sure.
Anyone doesn't know. I'll just scrolling through real quick, see if I see. I'm just starring stuff that's in caps, y'all. All right. Miss Brenda. Carrie, did you say the creature used its 4 paws to pull back and bite its neck? Yeah, that's what he wrote. Mm-hmm. Was 4 paws, which, he's describing an animal. He's not going to say hands. So it's telling of how they viewed what it was.
And they probably didn't know. I mean, they probably didn't even actually see the hands, right? Because it was just a silhouette. So he probably figured, well, it's got paws too.
Yeah, it's 4 paws. Yeah. And that was it. He tells it, eventually gets to the point where he says it's either half man or half devil.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the other half he thought was. He didn't say, but half man, half devil. Maybe that's what he was saying, but that's not how it was written.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's all in how it was viewed by whoever this was written by. Maybe that's not exactly how it was told in the story. Maybe it was. Roosevelt told this from memory. So what did Roosevelt change in there to make it a better story? Did he add, the neck biting? I've never heard of that from anybody. Of course, I've only heard 2 accounts from FBI agent that had examined hunting scenes where one was in Colorado, where they found the man leaning up against a tree with his head turned all the way around, facing backwards. Yeah. And his rifle was like 20 or 30 feet away, broken.
Oh, no. Wow.
Yeah. So I think if that's true and that actually happened, then he must have shot it. That's the only thing I can think is that he shot it. And then in central Alabama, the guy and the girl who were out in the woods getting busy with each other, they found the woman on the hood of the truck with no clothes on, bruised badly.
Yeah.
And beaten up and bloody, and found the man folded up backwards with his legs behind him and put in the front seat of the truck. Those are the only 2 that I've heard. And, neither one of those are biting. The only 2 that I can remember.
Right.
That could possibly be, Sasquatch doing it. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe Dog Man, if those things exist, Lord forbid.
Yeah, I know. It's like,
and I used to not give it much credence, but man,
there's a lot of people seeing it.
My goodness, when you hear some of these stories, when I heard Jeff Townsend talking about seeing and what he saw, yeah, it was worrying. Wow. What we got here? All right, I got a few more questions here. Got about 5. Could Bigfoot be ET? Why not?
Sure.
Doesn't make a lot of sense to me that if ET is going to show up, that they go run around through the woods hiding from us.
Right.
But do ETs study them? Someone suggested one time that ETs put Sasquatch here to watch us. And I'm like, yeah, we can watch ourselves from space, from satellites. Why does ET need someone on the ground to watch after us? So I don't know, if there's some technology is so much better,
right?
Sasquatch to do that.
Yeah.
But you hear the stories of a craft, and then there's this hairy Bigfoot comes down out of the beam or whatever. So much stuff that you hear,
right?
And I don't adhere to all of it. I don't dismiss any of it because I wasn't there. I've seen one. I know they exist. I can't tell you didn't see that. Right. Not genuinely. No way. Miss Vicky. Miss Vicky, I don't know who that was that put us in that Facebook group, but I wasn't talking to you when I made that comment. Just letting you know. I wonder if they draw to us. If they draw to us who are curious about them. I do believe this, that once you know and are aware, and maybe something changes with you. Like things happen, and now when you get out of the car, you're starting to look around in the woods a lot more, and you're starting to pay closer attention, that maybe they watch us closely enough to know our own tendencies, to know that, well, they know we're out here now. It seems to be the case that it's game on after that. They're throwing rocks and slapping the house and messing with you and whistling and yelling and tree knocking and, seemingly anemic things, nothing too terribly harmful. Maybe chickens get stolen. Donnie Miller lost 170 chickens in a week.
Wow. And
the latch on the door to the chicken house it wasn't done back, but the door was shut and the latch was opened. It was just one of those old screen door latches,
Sure. Wow.
Yeah. Had 180 chickens. They got for like a quarter a piece, these little chickens. And once they had gotten, pretty big, and Kim's out there feeding the chickens there, and she's noticing like 10 or 20 gone every day. And in a week, they had 10 left. And they said, well, before these are gone, they gave those to somebody else. Oh, but they had 82 goats.
Yeah.
That are never touched.
Oh, wow.
Huh. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe they understand, because Kim and Donnie, when they keep these goats, this is their family. That's what they do. They rescue goats. So there's just a ton. There's 80 something goats out there, in a fenced in place around the house. And they all have names, and they know every one of them's name. Yeah, it's crazy. But this is the kind of people these are. Just good folks. They want to take care of animals. And they have dogs, and but they never touched a goat. So maybe they know that, Donnie and them like the goats. We won't mess with those. But the chickens, those seem to be fair game. No pun intended.
Yeah, there was a place near here that Don and I checked out, and initially the people had 30 chickens, and they suddenly were down to 9. And Don and I, what also happened was they ended up finding a structure, like a weird domed structure, and I got photos of it, but it was very interesting because it was like rudimentarily weaved, and every branch was broken from up a 30-foot, big spruce tree that was right next to it, or pine of some kind. All of the branches were broke all the way up to about the 30-foot mark, and they were kind of interwoven into this dome, which was a bent over sapling, like a 6-inch sapling, which is bent over, not broken. But interestingly enough, they found this there was never any leaf litter, there was never any feather litter. It was just like these chickens in this pen were just disappearing, and what they found was there was a tear in the back wall. There's about the size of something like this, and it was like they were getting pulled out of there. So they they closed it up, or something happened that it got closed. I'm sure that, I don't remember the specifics, but then after we checked out that structure, it was like it all went quiet. It was, and I can't say that that's a Bigfoot structure. I didn't see them build it, but it was in this area where there's no kids. There's, I mean, it didn't look like a hunting blind like a person would have, but it was just like a rudimentary branch dome. And it was about 6 feet tall in the middle, inside, but it was really pretty big. And it was almost invisible from the house looking out into this forest, which was right next to it. No other kids around. Nobody would have been building it, but it just, and then once we checked it out, it just went into this degradation state. Like nobody was taking care of it. It just faded away.
But I mean, that's still something that was noticed, and that's what we have to do. We don't see these things doing it, so we kind of have to. And this is where, when I talk about anthropomorphizing and putting our own human limits on these creatures, kind of becomes an issue. Is when we're making these correlations and we're trying to put our own sense, because I have to do it. I've got to make sense of it. If that makes sense, I don't even like to mess with it. I saw the lights at Pam and Paul's. I can't make any good sense of it. But I saw them. I got them on camera too. You guys are going to get to see what we saw. Definitely. Gary McKinnon. Thank you, man. 10 pounds. That's like $14. Thanks, brother. Oh, Gary McKinnon, famous guy, by the way, for hacking into the NASA mainframe. I think that's what he did. That's
cool. All right.
That's actually him.
Well played, sir.
Yeah.
You're my hero. No, not that I'm advocating hacking and stuff, but anyway, I just.
Gary, have you ever tried to get Scott Carpenter on the show? He's been on several times. Actually, I met Scott in Tennessee last year and took him to dinner, and we had a nice long conversation. Of course, he never said who took him to dinner on his show. He said, I went to dinner with a family. It was us.
Oh,
we took him to, where we go, Alamo Steakhouse. That's where we went. I'm just looking real quick for some more. We've got a couple of questions here to get through, Brent. If you're not in a big hurry. Miss Brenda again.
I got time.
Oh, I don't know why. She must have asked it twice. Okay. Sorry about that, Miss Brenda. I don't read them. I just go through. If I see caps, I just star it and save it for later. Wonder Woman. Good to see you, Miss K. Carrie, are the feelings of dread diminishing? For me, absolutely. They are.
Good.
As long as I prepare for it. 168 hours, I prepared for it. And it's not so much a dreadful feeling as it is a reaction. It's a physical reaction that I have. Like not a panic attack, really, but I feel sick and shaky and weak and sweaty and clammy. And to prepare for 168, I went around. We've got an 8-foot privacy fence all the way around the backyard. So I would go, you have to go around it because there's no door out the back to get to the woods. So I would go around it to the corner and I would go in the woods 10 or 15 feet and stay there as long as I could, just looking around. And I mean to tell you, it was in my mind that there was one behind every bush. And it took a while. It took a few days for me anyway to get beyond that. But it was that repetition. It was doing it, going back into the woods over and over and preparing for it. Donnie Miller's, I didn't prepare for. I didn't do any of that. And it showed when we got there, because of what I was ill prepared for was being 9 miles deep off the road into the woods on this little sandy road. I mean, a long way back there in the middle of nowhere. And once we heard those vocalizations, the talking, that freaked me out. Because I was by myself when it happened. Me and Mark are there, and it's, I don't know, 5 o'clock. It's not quite dark. It's still early in the evening. And I pick up the wood splitter axe, and Donnie had taken us over before and showed us what he called Jeff's Corner, where he had seen the one while he was, making the road, cutting the trees out. And on our way, I had seen what we call rich lighter pine, which is just hard of pine, and it's old, and it's very flammable. It's perfect fire stuff. I wouldn't put it in my fireplace because you'll get creosote all on the inside of but you can use a little bit of it to light your fire. So I saw that and I remembered where it was. So it was by the creek. So I knew all I had to do is follow the creek down and I'd see it. So when we came back that afternoon after filming, I grabbed the wood splitter axe and I'll go across this little bridge across the creek there that Donnie had made with a culvert. And I'm walking down the creek. And as I'm going, we hear, hey, wow. And I stopped dead in my tracks. And I'm like maybe 40 yards from Mark. He's back at camp. And I could see it. If I didn't know where I was going, I would have turned around and went back right then. Because it was about 60 yards, roughly. It wasn't really close, but it wasn't extremely far away either. It was close enough. And who knows what they were saying? Hey, here he comes. He's got axe in his hand,
Do they taste like chicken?
Yeah, I probably don't. I probably taste like snuff. So, so I go down. I mean, 3 hits, man. And it's not just a regular axe; it's a wood splitter axe, so it's heavy. And I'll just give it everything I got. And like 3 hits, I cut it in 2, and instead of chopping it up, I just grab it. And I'm dragging it back. And when I get to that little bridge before getting to camp, Mark says, man, did you hear that? I was like, yeah, he's like 100 yards away. I was like, no, it's like 60 yards for me, which is, yeah, it's 100 yards for you because you were 40 yards behind me. But from then on, dude, for days after I got home, I could not talk to you without sounding like I was selling you a timeshare or something. I was just so not me. I was not myself. And the show we did that Friday, I took it down. And everybody said it was such a great show. And I'm like, I may put it back up for you guys, but it's unlisted right now because I just was not myself. And I was still feeling that. I can't describe it,
right? What
it did to me, but it stayed with me for a few days. And then finally I came to my senses and back around.
Good. Wow.
Yeah. I guess good. I don't know.
The fact that you're getting out there at all, I think, is really incredible, because if I had seen what you had experienced as close and up close and personal as you had, I don't think I'd probably ever go back out there. I
don't like it. I pledged to never go back.
Right.
And then, here I am doing it. So never say never, people.
Right.
Because I would have told you 2 years ago, for what? What am I going for? I don't need to prove anything to myself. There's nothing I can prove to anybody else. And then I came to the realization that maybe we can, maybe not prove anything, but at least get something a little bit more convincing. So that's when I called Mark Zaski and said, hey, you want to do this? And he jumped aboard. So Ray Rosendahl says, what is the best picture or video of someone else's that you've seen? Jesus from Breaking Bigfoot has the best aside from Banner, and they're probably equal. He got one from about 40 yards away that I'd show you guys here, but it ain't mine. But geez, Breaking Bigfoot. You guys go and subscribe to Breaking Bigfoot. He's such a good dude, very high energy. You can just, when you talk to somebody, you can just tell they're just a positive influence. Connor Finley. Is it Finley or Flynn? I can't remember. Connor. Bigfoot Anon, same way. Except Connor even more. When you get around that guy, he's just such an uplifting spirit person. So that would be the other. And I'll ask him and I'll put it on here for you guys and show you. But it's absolutely amazing. You see the shoulders and its head is sitting down where it should be. And then you see the entire face clearly.
Wow.
It's amazing. I'll send it to you, Brent.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. Yep.
I'll tell you what. I'll send it to you right now. maybe you can show it, and that way he won't get mad at me. No, I don't think he'd get mad, but I haven't asked him, so I don't want to just go showing other people's stuff.
Right.
Where is it? It's right here.
For me, I've always been impressed with the Freeman footage, and of course the Patterson Gimlin, and even that skunk ape footage that came out of Florida, where it's in the swampy area pulling apart that tree stump or the part of that tree.
Mississippi.
That's Mississippi. Okay, I thought that was really compelling footage. Like, wow, like it really strikes me as probable, or at least very possible, that was legitimate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The way he behaves. That's what you have to look at. Who's filming, what's their behavior, what's the motive, anything happen after that. It's unfortunate that we have to do those things, but we do.
Sure.
We do.
I'll tell you what, like the one part that really kind of sold me was just the sound of that wood breaking. It's not just punky rotten stuff. And even some of the mechanics it uses to put, like it puts a hand up and it yanks it out like this in a way that I don't think anybody would grab and pull like this. But it's like snap, and it's like, wow, that was incredible.
Brent, you think you can carry it for about 30 seconds?
Sure, absolutely. So I think there's lots of good material out there, but unfortunately the bad part is that there's a lot that's not good, and it gets to be really hard to know sometimes. Like, nobody wants to like fall behind something and end up getting, took, like, and find out, oh, it was a hoax. It was just a some stupid joke or something. But there's some great stuff out there. I think, just if you look around and even on YouTube, there's a lot of trash on YouTube too. But I think, honestly, for me, one of the better videos I've ever heard of helping you distinguish between what is a good video and what isn't in terms of Bigfoot is put together by Thinker Thunker. He does a whole breakdown of body ratios, and I thought, God, that's brilliant, because and he uses the Patterson Gimlin as a great example of the body ratios and why that's not a human being. And it was just so much good information. So yeah, I think there's some good stuff out there. You just got to really hunt for it sometimes.
Well, to me, the thing about Patterson Gimlin, the drawback is with it being the only real good full body stuff we got, other than Freeman that he got in 95, is that that's what people are looking for.
Right.
And they just don't all look like that.
Right.
They don't. And I think we can't see the face really good. A lot of what you see of the face has been manufactured. I just want everyone to know that here now. It's been drawn in a little bit with, digitally. So we don't know that that's hair on the face. I have yet to see a picture, any picture that we have, there's no hair on any of them's face. Look at the depictions of wild men from Europe back in the day. Big, hairy bodies, no hair on his face. That's all in the paintings, the pictures that are drawn, the depictions. So does Patty actually have hair on their face? I've had plenty of people talk about and describe seeing it, and that's what they had was hair, hair. It was sparse, but there was some hair. And maybe that is the case with some. The Native Americans didn't have hair on their face.
Good point.
Yeah, I have a point. That's why I wear a hat. So you can't see it.
Your conical head.
That's right. Well, man, it's we got an hour and a half in. I appreciate you showing up for sure. I got guys out on location. They won't leave me the hell alone. So
no, that's fine.
Oh, I saw some caps here. Maybe they sway left and right, so they see better. Far apart eyes have less depth perception.
Oh, that's a fascinating idea.
Huh? Maybe. I guess it depends on the angle, though. Wouldn't it, Gary? You know, if their eyes are, you know, forward facing and larger, you know, would the ratio still be the same? The size of our eye compared to the distance in between, which is about 2.5 inches. We've got the big guy that I show, his eyes are 7 inches apart easily.
Wow.
I won't show it. You guys have seen it a million times. Yeah. So does the size of the eye in correlation to the width matter? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying they seem to be able to see very well, regardless, even in the dark, you know, or what's dark for us. And maybe they don't see in the same spectrum of light that we do,
right?
Or hear, and, you know, the same sounds that we do. We're not supposed to be able to hear anything below 20,000 hertz, which is what infrasound is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Gary actually talked about that in a comment one day. But you can, and he made this, you know, distinction too, is that you can actually hear sometimes things. And I think more you can feel it. Sounds that are below that 20,000 hertz range. So that's what we refer to as it's infrasound for us, for human beings. It wouldn't be infrasound for something that could, you know, detect it, obviously. But I forget the point I was getting at there, but it doesn't really matter. It's been a good show.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate.
I appreciate you coming on, man. You know, I thought about you Wednesday. And I was like, I got it's like 10 minutes left before the show. I was like, I can do this. We'll fly solo. It'll work out.
You did. I was there. I was watching. That was when you read the Osmond story, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did that one by myself. A little bit of color commentary in there. I can't help it. I can't go through a whole story and not say anything. I can't do it. So don't come to me for the story. If you want to hear the story, good. Cam, Steve Isdall, Wes Germer, you get the full story there. Me, I'm interjecting. That's all there is to it. And thank you, Cashew, for this. You can go subscribe to Paranormal Portal. You going live tonight?
No, I've got no live show tonight, but also the podcast is on all the major platforms. So just look for Paranormal Portal on Spotify, Pandora, iTunes.
So good, y'all. It really is. You really need to go. It's always a good discussion between you and Don. You've always got really interesting stuff that you bring out, the stories that you tell, and wherever you get them from. I don't know. Maybe Reddit or some places you get some of these, but
some of them, yeah.
But yeah, just go subscribe to Paranormal Portal. You do live on YouTube. Is it Wednesday?
Yes. Wednesday, Friday, Saturday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific.
Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys go check that out. That's 9 o'clock p.m. Central. I remembered that part. just about my bedtime. So, but thanks again, Brent, for coming on. And I'll probably call you first next time.
All right, brother. I'm always here.
Appreciate you very much. Thanks everybody else for joining us here tonight. Don't forget, check out the link in the description for Impossible. You guys go watch it. You know, or at least go check out the website. You don't have to rent the film, but the website's got a ton of good stuff on it that I think you guys will really enjoy. And there's a lot more coming. So put it in your little favorites there at the top. It's cryptoodyssey.com. But if you just hit that link, it'll take you right there. You can check out the film. Everyone has said it's worth it. I thought it was worth it 100%. Just the banner shot to me is worth it. But it's how we keep going and how we keep doing this, because there is no funding. And when you travel and put, hundreds of hours into it, it costs a lot of money. And I wish we didn't have to do that, but that was the only way we could think of. We were going to do Patreon, and I didn't want to put a monthly charge on people. I wanted it to be by film basis. We put it out there. You guys can watch it. You can rent it and watch it whenever you want to. So, or maybe not whenever. I think it's like a 72-hour rental. The only way we were able to get around that was we were going to sell it, but that means you can download it. And if you can download it, then you can share it with a bunch of people. And that's been an issue before. So anyway, we appreciate the help very much, and you're getting something for your money anyway. But Brent, thanks again. Check out Paranormal Portal. You guys do it, and we'll see you back here Wednesday night, 7:00 p.m. Central. We'll have something for you. Maybe Danielle will be back. We'll see.
Cool.
Yeah, but if not, she'll be back soon. Thanks again, Brent. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you guys.